Folks, I'm Dr. Nick Fanning with Vitality Chiropractic, and I am so excited for another webinar that we have tonight. And with me tonight is Heather Gill, who is local pastor, local mom, coach, speaker on the road, all over the state of Nebraska and South Dakota and Colorado, and seems like everywhere. And Heather tonight is joining us in our webinar called Owning Your B.S. And it's definitely a title that had some people really intrigued and some people maybe a little insulted, but that is not our intention. Our intention is for lasting true change. And we've gone too long trying to be politically correct. We've gone too long just kind of holding people's hands. It's time for action, and that's why I brought Heather here. So Heather, do you mind maybe doing a short little introduction about yourself?
A short little, okay, it'll be short. I'm Heather Gill, and we've lived in Ogallala now for, I think, 17 years. I have 2 dogs, 3 boys. My kids are grown up and out of the house. So I work a lot coaching in early childhood. And then I'm passionate about security and building secure connections for families.
Beautiful. Good. Yeah. So Heather, my question is, why is this your passion? What led you to do this type of work?
I think it was a process. I wasn't one of those things where just all of a sudden I woke up one day that was going to be what I do for my life. It was a whole series of just experiences, my own life experiences, and what other people have taught me. I think what other people have taught me is the most important thing that has led me to this passion. I believe relationships are where healing really begins. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's.
Are you when you talk about this journey that you've been and how you've gotten here? I assume that means also yourself, but probably friends and family too as well. Is there anything that was like really stuck out to bring you to this point?
Well, I think I had a very interesting childhood. So I'm the oldest of 6 girls on a ranch, working ranch, isolated, kind of in the middle of nowhere. So we had to learn to be very self-sufficient and independent. I grew up trying to figure out how to help my sisters get along because it made life easier. And then really how to pair mom and calf. So that's where it started for me, of learning how to work with a relationship to make that healthy. So I was thinking about that today. Calving probably was one of my first experiences in helping moms and babies attach. So
that's awesome. It's funny that we can draw a lot of similarities, and it all comes down to sometimes just the basics. We tend to overcomplicate things, and yet here it is. It's animals really don't complicate things.
No, it's actually pretty simple. And then just our own life experiences. I started school right after high school, took college, and was going to go into psychology and counseling. And then I began to have my babies. So just kind of wanted to be home with them as much as possible for at least for a while. And they taught me a ton, have a lot of experiences with very wild boys. So that to me that's my most important job, is being a mom and being a wife and trying to be a hub for my family. So I feel like that's taught me a lot. And then my own past had some trauma and abuse and some things like that happened along the way. So just learning through experience as God directed me and sharing my story with others.
Perfect. So you're telling me you weren't always perfect and it wasn't always easy for you, but you yourself had a lot of your own story and a lot of your own things that you had to learn to accept as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, very much, very much. My mom, in fact, my mom was a single mom until I was 4. And so there's just some experiences in there, and those are early childhood days that impact the rest of our lives. And I think that's something to be thinking about, that a lot of those hidden trauma and hidden memories and things that drive us from our early ages forward. I see that as something we really have to recognize and be aware of in our life and then in other people's lives.
Okay. So what do you mean by that?
I guess that a lot of our memories happen before we can communicate. So things may drive us that we're not even aware of. And I think that that's been my experience of realizing where some of my own insecurities and issues and even health issues started way before I could even put my finger on it, so to speak. So our brains are amazing, and as we overcome abuse or neglect or trauma, our brains tend to put things away in these tidy little, boxes and try and keep them kind of in a folder until we're ready to deal with things. So I think it's pretty cool how God created our brains. I think that's pretty
Absolutely. Cool. You did a pretty good job. I mean, if you think about two cells together, voila, and on top of that, we can do all these things, think all these things, and access so much. It's pretty amazing. So, well, go ahead.
I guess that where you say my passion is, I think my passion is that the relationships that we have are the most important treasure that we can ever have, and that we need to take really good care of them, because I think a lot of times we don't recognize. We learn parenting by how we were parenting. My parents learned because they were homestead kids, so how we learn to deal with feelings and everything goes back to how we experienced it. And I've made a lot of mistakes with my boys as well. So part of this is processing all of my mistakes so that I can communicate that with the boys and hopefully change some generational things.
At the same time, I think making mistakes is parenting. That's it just seems to be. You're reminded that every single day. Oh, I'm definitely not perfect. Oh gosh, I wish I could have done that better, and not beating yourself up for it.
And wait until they're out of the house and they really learn what. Then you become smart, but you also they realize the things that maybe we could have done differently, which is a true blessing, because I think if we weren't willing to be honest about those mistakes, that they couldn't talk with us about them. And I do think that's one of the important parts of owning our B.S. is being able to be honest enough to say, yeah, we had a lot of screw ups, and here's where we are, and here's what we've learned, and here's where we're going, to be able to divide that up for our kids. It's pretty important.
Well, hey, that was a perfect segue, Heather. I mean, just talking right into what we're here at Stock tonight is help people accept who they are, but also transition and really make some lasting changes in their lives. And so, we touched a little bit past on history and stuff like that. But I guess if we had to sum it all up, where would you really start in this presentation or in this discussion?
I think I've thought a lot about this. My husband's like, "Did you work on this all day?" I did, but it's hard for me to put it into one simple, concrete word. So I think that at the beginning, when we look at it, is every single one of us has a journey. Every one of us has a story to tell, and every single one of us has a decision that we have to make as far as where are we at on this journey, and to make a decision that are we okay where we are, or do we need to make some changes and take some steps to move forward. The other thing is I've thought a lot about, I grew up, with a very hard work ethic. And I do believe that work is good, and that each of us are given that responsibility and our share of the burden that we need to carry through life. And so I do think there's a difference between too much burden and not seeing that we are responsible to carry our fair share, so to speak. I hope that makes sense.
If you don't mind, can you just go in a little bit more detail about, yes, I know we have all our own stories, all of our own journeys, and all of our own burdens. Yeah. But what do you mean, like us and our fellow man, us and God? What do you mean by that as far as the burden sharing?
Okay. I think, well, for me, it goes back to the Garden of Eden. God made this amazing garden, and he said, okay, this is your land. You manage it, you take care of it. And I think at that point, he put in the heart of all of us a purpose and a job and a responsibility to really take ownership of our whole life, not just our stuff, but also our gifts, our talents, our responsibilities, our choices, our feelings. I believe that we need to own all of those things. Within that's just how life is supposed to be, each of us doing our job. I thought a lot about, when it first started out, if there was peace, but then we tend to make pressure out of everything, make everything complicated, and pressure kind of took the place of that peace, and we took on a lot more stuff that isn't ours to take on, and some things that maybe we just need to deal with.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all too easy to try to, as a mom, especially, or as a parent, just to put everything on our shoulders and our responsibilities. So how do we give that up?
Yeah, well, anyone who knows me, that if I know you, I'm taking on part of your world. I am just a mother at heart, and I will mother everybody who will let me. I think for me, one of the things that I learned through this process of my own life, I struggled a lot with postpartum depression, and I did a lot of work during that. And one thing I learned is boundaries is a property line. It keeps the good in and the bad out. And so I think being able to take a look at that property line and say, what is inside of here, I'm responsible for. My kids, my husband, my church, my job, I have a responsibility too. And for me, if I can really process that and take that picture of they have their own to take responsibility for, the same as I do. So that is what I try to do, to be able to differentiate between what's mine and what's theirs. Sometimes that's easier said than done.
Would you say that there's a lot of, I don't know, guilt or anxiety or even depression from people trying to step outside of those boundaries and trying to either control, worry, or you know what I mean, outside of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Simple answer. I like it.
There's a little bit of a time change between us. So every once in a while, if I look really dumb, it's because I'm waiting for it to end. But I do think that we get everything mixed up. I see it as a pile. I don't know about you, but we have mismatched socks. They disappear in the wash and in the dryer. And so I have a sock box. Everything goes in there that doesn't have friends or mates. And every once in a while, then I dump it out and I'm sorting through all this. So I do feel that sometimes we have to have time in our life where we dump that out and kind of sort through everything. Because for me, I know that it's easier for me to take responsibility for the things that I've chosen to take on, where some of those things that you feel are put on you are a little harder to manage, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense. So I thought about that as far as even sometimes when things are put on us from outside areas, or all of those hidden beliefs or abuse or insecurities or fear. For me, it's a lot of shame and guilt. That's the biggest pile of BS in my life, and separating that out is a lot more difficult to me. And I do think we get controlling, and that tends to be when we think we can fix it all on our own.
Okay. So, I know you're sorting through these socks and stuff like that, but, you talk about the trauma, the abuse, hidden beliefs, even your own insecurities. I mean, are you saying, I know obviously we can't control this, but, obviously it's happened to us. We still have to, basically this whole thing is owning that BS.
Yeah.
So we still have to own it, but yet you're saying I guess clarify that if you don't mind.
Okay. I think for me, I've had to go through a system. So first I have to recognize what's legit, what's legit, you know what I'm trying to say, mine to hold on to and to carry. What is mine to own? There is abuse and neglect and trauma. For me, there's things that I've just talked about recently that I have never talked about before, and I'm old. So, to carry that kind of stuff. But I do think that we do have a responsibility to those things, even how maybe we respond to them, if that makes sense. So sometimes I think people are abused and neglected, and we have pity. And for me, that is not something, as a survivor of abuse or someone who's experienced trauma, I don't want pity. I would like to own that and say that I have taken control of that, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. You're not looking for a handout. You want answers, you want understanding, and you want your close loved ones to understand you better, I guess, or your drive, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, I do believe that when we own our own BS, that it is the point that we can become successful even because of. It's a strength in some aspects. When I really took control of that, or when I owned my past, that is when it began to be something that I could use as a strength instead of something that was just weighing me down. So I sometimes I think when we go through horrible things, we tend to think, I have nothing to do with that. I am powerless. I have no choices in my life. And to me, that is the biggest bunch of the BS that we're talking about. Is we can't control what happened to us, but we can and should and are responsible to take ownership for that result, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, bad things happen to everybody, and whatever happened to us can be a tragedy or things, but at the same time, we just can't shove it down, push it away, not acknowledge it, not honor this. And instead, if you embrace it, man, it stinks that it may have happened, or you may have thought that at one time, but once you own it, then you can move it. One of my mentors said, to really truly clear the slate, you have to know what's on the slate first.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be the big thing there. So you said there was a stepwise or a series of things that you did to own all those bad and good, but your past is what suggestions do you have?
Well, the first thing that is important to me is to realize that we have to check our mindset to see if we have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. For me, I started out with a real fixed mindset. This stuff happened to me. I can't be perfect. Thus, I'm just going to have to live with this the rest of my life. And so to understand first and foremost that we can fail, we can fall, we can trip on and just make a mess out of things. But really what I believe is God wants us at that moment to come before him and say, okay, now what can I learn from this? And how can I grow because of it? So that's the first step, is really looking at, do I have this closed, everything's happened to me, I can't move past it mindset, or this, I'm going to grow because of it and through it and in spite of it mindset. So that's my first big step, is to think about choosing a mindset. The second thing is love. And I know you talked about that as far as some of the introduction to this. And honestly, that's a very uncomfortable topic. So it's an uncomfortable topic, I believe, for us, especially in the Midwest. Love yourself. And you said it's not really going to be a hippie type conversation. And I was really glad you said that, because for me, loving myself sounds like the corniest thing, that you could think of. So when I first was growing up, and became married and then had my kids, I realized that the love that God talks about is unconditional. It's independent of how we feel or how we don't feel. It's a commitment. So I love my husband, I love my boys, even if I'm not feeling it, so to speak. And I really thought a lot about this in relationship to my own healing and growth, because I used to think loving myself is just a sign of being selfish. That's a sign of elevating myself, and I shouldn't do it. I thought a lot about taking care of myself was selfish. When I first thought about exercise, that is something that I saw as a luxury. If I have time then, or clothes, all of those things, are basically a luxury or an extracurricular activity, where if we truly look at loving ourselves in the way of taking responsibility and making a commitment to being the person God wants us to be, I feel a lot more responsibility to that now. It's easier for me to see it as an important activity, not just mush, if I can say it that way.
Gave me goosebumps, Heather. You're on fire right now. You're hitting your stride. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
you might
wow,
have.
that's a huge point right there. So,
well, I was reading the whole, love your neighbor as yourself portion, and I can get the love your neighbor. But when I thought about if I'm loving my next door neighbor like I'm loving myself, then that's awful. I would never be as vicious to my neighbor as I can be to myself and my own thinking and my own how I care for myself. I would never treat my neighbor that way. I would be ashamed if I treated them that way.
Like that internal dialogue. You got to break that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I can be aware of that and conscious of it and think about that while I'm having that self-talk to me, which you reminded me of again tonight, but as I'm downing myself, I would never treat someone else that way, ever, ever, ever. So I think that has been a really big awareness for me, that I am just as responsible to love and care for this person that God made me to be, as much as I am to love and care for my family and the people that I love. So that's a pretty big, it makes me feel uncomfortable to say love yourself, but.
At the same time though, love is an abundant thing. And once you can love yourself, you'll have more of yourself to love others. And it's just one of those things that perpetuates itself,
Yeah.
And if God is truly love, and we're trying to strive for that. Phew, man. Yeah. Mind blown.
Well, and the other thing is I think about, sorry, it keeps shutting off. I don't know where we are. But if I can build my capacity to love, I can love others more easily. So sometimes when I'm really hard on myself, I tend to be hard on other people, especially those that I am closest to. So that's another reason for thinking about that loving ourselves piece. I don't know if that makes sense.
I would agree that, because when I get myself in a funk, and have a little pity party, I can tell that I'm not as patient and kind with the kids.
Yeah.
I don't really want to admit that online, but I am going to. Or, you're absolutely right.
We're owning our BS.
Yes. Well, I'm waiting in it over here. So
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
That's a big topic. So we talked about owning our BS so far, and accepting it as a gift. Well, not always a great gift, but it's part of us. And then we talked about love. What's the next step?
I'm thinking that you said, what was the second one? You cut out at that time. So I'm just going to go with it.
Okay, good.
I have the second one. The second step to owning our BS is that acceptance.
Yeah.
And something that I've learned a lot is when I can unconditionally accept anybody and everybody that I come into contact with, it's a gift to them. For me to be able to look at a child with my eyes that say, you're the most awesome kid in the whole world, or if I'm looking at them like, oh, you're annoying, I'm either giving them a gift or I'm taken away from them by either one of those things. So my goal has always been that I have no expectations of other people as far as outcomes. I work really hard on not just loving them when they're doing everything I want them to do, having that complete and total acceptance. Not that acceptance is agreement. I'm not going to accept when my kids were being rude, or even my husband and I, we will confront each other with things when it's, oh, that's not okay, or this isn't okay. But I think it's an acceptance that says, I love you for who you are as is, and I'm committed to you for who you are as is. And when it comes to myself and owning our BS, I think about this as God doesn't agree with my self-destructive behavior, right? Any of our self-destructive behavior. He's not like, you change and you fix yourself, then I'll accept you. And yet that's what I do for me, is say, I have a lot of destructive behavior. He's not saying to me, oh, I like that you overeat to comfort yourself, or I like this, or I like that. So instead of coming to God knowing that he was going to accept me, I felt like I had to fix everything first and then come to God, and then he would accept me. And so to work for that acceptance, it's never going to happen. I'm never going to be good enough for God's acceptance, and I really need to figure out how to just have that same acceptance of myself. And I thought a lot about this because I've tried everything else and it doesn't work. So I tried a lot of shaming. I've tried punishing myself. I tried working harder. I've tried guilting. I've tried making excuses, and deflection's one of my best gifts. So my family will say, Mom, we're worried about you. I know. Yeah, I'm trying. But I think until I came to that acceptance myself, that this is who I am, I think my mindset was so closed that it was more of a prison than anything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So shaming and judging and telling myself I'm a dirtbag it never works.
No. And that's an excellent point. I think we can touch a lot on that because with people's negative self-talk about that stuff and their tendency to beat themselves up, it touches back to what we were talking about earlier, is accepting that good and bad in our past. So yeah. Heather, I know you have a few other steps. What's your third step?
Okay. My third step is refusing to play God. Sorry, I think I just talked over you again.
Nope, you're good.
I don't know. We have this little bit of a delay.
I know.
Forgiveness for me, and how it's defined in the Bible, is that we are releasing someone else from our judgment and our revenge. And I think for me, I spent my whole life really judging and vengeance upon myself. And I know that sounds ugly, but just to show why it's a systematic thing is when you see yourself as unlovable and unacceptable, it's pretty natural then to say, well, I'm not these two things, so I must need to exact some punishment on myself. And it's not logical, but it is how our minds work, I think. So for a long time, those memories and feelings would get in my way of, but here's how you acted, or here's what you did, or you are a dirtbag. And, all those memories and emotions were there. And so to come to the conclusion that I have to forgive based on, not on feeling, but on a commitment and on an act of will instead of a feeling, I have to forgive myself that way. And I think that's a huge, huge step to owning our BS, is when we can say, I am not to take vengeance on myself. That's up to God to forgive me. That's up to God to deal with me. That's up to God. Oh my goodness. I lost my husband. Come here, girl. And my dog is barking. But
all right, my cat literally just stole some food and I was like, so yeah, this is our pet.
He just heard a cat coming through. But I know, and it's easy for me to forgive other people and not hold on to that anger and unforgiveness based on that memory. But it's not so great for me. So
you're saying that sometimes you lay awake at night thinking about, if only I would have said that, or why did I do those things? Total totally human for us to do those sort of things. And yeah, I absolutely think that, you know, whatever shortcomings is, owning it and forgiving yourself and just finally saying goodbye.
No. Yeah, I need a muzzle for my.
Okay. Well, it seems like we're really on a roll as far as owning and accepting and forgiving and letting go, and that takes a lot of guts to do. So, any advice on what you would say to that?
I think we have to be really honest, and I know it takes a lot of guts, but I do believe that if we can find someone to trust, someone that we can be real with, someone that will take us for who we are, I think it helps with everything else. For me, that's God. He's my hands. That is always there. I know that he'll take me back the minute I come back and say, okay, it's me again. And here's what I've done, and here's where I've screwed up. And to be able to have that kind of a completely accepting relationship is, for me, gives me the courage, you know, to keep going, because I'm not done owning my BS. And that's what I thought about before we did this webinar, is how can I talk about it when I am like in the middle of it? And I will be, honestly, you know, for the rest of our lives, we'll have stuff that we need to bring to it. But I think, Nick, when we have some brokenness and some humbleness, and we just bring that before God and tell other people, and have some relationships that we can build on, I think that's what gives us the courage to make those changes. Quite honestly, for me and for my family, until we allowed ourselves, or maybe until we were just completely broken, we couldn't get real. We couldn't get past having to be perfect or having to hide. You know, we're pastors. We shouldn't have problems. Pastors' wives should not have depression. You know, pastors' wives should not have a temper. You know, all of those shaming things that we put on ourselves that are so unrealistic. And then for me, I promised God that if he could help me be a mom and love my kids, help me get over the postpartum depression and the anxiety. I had horrible anxiety. And so if he would help me, that I would wear like a sign on my back, you know, that says, here's reality, and so that other people maybe could be more real and be okay to be real. I think that's a gift we can give the world, is to be real. That's my opinion. I think we can help others own their BS if they know we're in the process of trying to own our own. I think. Well,
I think you just hit the head on the nail of why I'm doing these interviews the way we're doing it. I mean, we didn't rehearse at all. We didn't come up with a plan of action. I just said, hey, Heather, I want to hear about your passion, and let's talk about it. And you got brave, and you shared your heart with us tonight. And I think it went awesome. What do you think?
I think it was fun. I hope it made sense. I do have books, of course. I'm a huge reader, and I believe that's a great gift for people who are trying to get well and own their own BS. So one of my favorite, can I show you, is Mindset. That's one of my favorite books. And then this is a book that I don't think we talk a lot, but it's Get a Grip. And I love it because it's how to take control of the things that are controlling you. And I believe that being able to dig in and read and hear what God has to say and hear what other people have to say if they've walked through that journey is important.
Beautiful.
And
Heather, if this message resonated with some of the people out there, is there a good way to get a hold of you or find out more?
Yeah, people could always email me. It's gill.heather1@gmail.com, or call me. And I'm horrible about answering my phone though, so leave a message. So I tell everybody, but it's 289-1310. And I'm on Facebook, of course, so you can find me there.
You have a blog too, don't you?
I do. It's called Heart's Cry. Talk about being vulnerable. So
Sorry.
yeah, no, it's not funny. No, my grandpa had dyslexia. It's hard to get from my head onto the paper. So it's more of it's a journey, but I do try to be very real on there. And I would love to have a spot where people could talk about these really important things of depression and anxiety. And you shouldn't have to go through that alone. No. So I would love to talk, especially to moms, and that's where my heart is moms with young kids at home, and you're trying to be the be all do all, and inside you're falling apart. And I'm asking them right now not to hide themselves that way, but to seek someone that they can talk to and be real with, because that's too heavy of a burden for us to carry. So.
My wife is sitting across the kitchen table, and I think she's got whiplash from nodding so much tonight.
Oh.
She's like, oh no, I'm not going to cry.
Call a chiropractor.
Well, Heather, with all the people who are watching and will be watching, last thought.
Last thoughts.
Or summarize, or what's the big thing?
I guess the big thing is to just be honest and real, and come before God and come before others, and don't be afraid to be broken, because I think that's where healing begins. And then to know that they are so worth it, that their kids are worth it, their families are worth it, for them to take care of themselves. Because being a mom, and I know everybody has lots of callings, but being a mom is, to me, the most important calling any of us women will ever have. And it goes so fast. It is over in a heartbeat. So please, I guess my final thoughts are to tell people to embrace the step where they are, and find someone to walk with you along that way, and don't quit. Don't quit. And own the BS.
Well, Heather, thank you so much for taking time away from your family, your puppies, and sharing your story, but also sharing your heart on this awesome interview. For everybody out there, thank you so much. And I would challenge you that, write it out, talk it out, find that someone, have a great talk with God, reach out to Heather if you need to, but use this webinar to be a catalyst for change. You got to do something to make that we break the mold, because if you've been holding on for this long, and Heather knows that she's still holding on to some things, but it's a process. But let's move forward with this process, and let's do it together and get it done with. So Heather, thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us tonight. This is Dr. Nick Fanning, Vitality Chiropractic, signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.